A stormy arrival. The wind howled a banshee's lament, tearing at the barn's weathered timbers. Rain lashed down in sheets, turning the farmyard into a muddy swamp. Inside the relative shelter of the stable, Belle, the old Mustang mare, strained, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Farmer McGregor, his face etched with worry, knelt beside her, a flickering lantern casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. "Come on, girl," he muttered, more to himself than to the horse. "Nearly there now." Belle whinnied, a sound lost in the storm's fury, and pushed again. McGregor gripped her halter, his knuckles white. He was a man of the land, used to the harsh realities of life and death, but the sight of an animal suffering always tugged at something deep inside him. He hadn't expected Belle to foal. She was old, past her prime. Suddenly, a small, slick body slid into the straw. Hope. But something was wrong. The foal lay still, shivering violently, its breathing shallow and uneven. McGregor quickly cleared the mucus from its nostrils, his heart sinking. It was small, too small, and its legs trembled beneath it. "Blast it all," he cursed, his voice tight with concern. He grabbed a rough towel and began to rub the foal vigorously, trying to stimulate its circulation. Hope coughed, a weak, rattling sound, and opened its eyes, large and dark with confusion. McGregor felt a flicker of hope himself, quickly doused by the relentless storm raging outside. "She's weak, Belle," he said, stroking the mare's flank. "Very weak. This storm won't help her none." He knew the odds were stacked against the foal. Hypothermia, pneumonia, any number of things could claim her in the next few hours. He could almost hear his neighbor, Old Man Hemlock, saying, "Put her down, Angus. Save yourself the trouble." But something held him back. Maybe it was the desperate look in the foal's eyes, or maybe it was the memory of his own hard-scrabble childhood. Whatever it was, he knew he couldn't just give up on her. Not yet. He rose stiffly, his joints protesting, and headed towards the barn door, bracing himself against the wind. "Gotter get some blankets," he muttered. "And some hot water. Gotter give her a fighting chance." He disappeared into the storm, leaving Belle to nuzzle her shivering foal, a fragile beacon of life in the heart of the tempest. A difficult decision. The rumble of Ellie's battered Jeep Cherokee announced her arrival. Angus met her in the yard, the setting sun casting long shadows from the barn. He gestured toward the makeshift stall where Hope lay, a pathetic heap of dust-colored fur. "Don't get your hopes up, Doc," he said, his voice rough around the edges. "She ain't been right since birth. Probably best to put her out of her misery." Ellie knelt beside the foal, her touch gentle as she ran a hand down Hope's thin back. The mare flinched, a flicker of pain crossing her face. Ellie listened to Hope's shallow breathing, her brow furrowing with concern. "She's weak, dehydrated. Congenital issues, you think?" she asked, her gaze meeting Angus's. "Likely," he grunted, leaning against the stall. "Tried everything I know. Waste of good milk." Ellie ignored the gruffness. She saw past it, recognizing the exhaustion in his eyes. "Let's not give up just yet. Her heart's still strong, and there's a spark there." She pointed to Hope's eyes, clouded but with a faint glimmer of awareness. "I've seen worse pull through." Angus scoffed, running a calloused hand over his stubbled chin. "Easy for you to say, document. You ain't the one paying for it. This farm ain't a charity." Ellie stood, her shoulders squared. "I understand your concerns, Angus, but I won't euthanize an animal with a fighting chance. Not when there's a possibility, however slim." I'll do what I can, pro bono. But I need your help. Are you in, or out? The question hung in the air, thick with the scent of hay and impending night. Angus stared at the foal, then at Ellie, his expression unreadable. Finally, he sighed, the sound heavy with resignation. Fine, he said, the word barely audible. But if she don't improve by morning, we do things my way. Ear. A night of hope. The back of Ellie's jeep smelled faintly of antiseptic and hay, usually a comforting aroma, but tonight it was laced with a metallic tang that made her stomach clench. Hope lay nestled in a makeshift bed of blankets, her breathing shallow and rapid. Ellie risked a glance in the rearview mirror. The foal's dark eyes were glazed, unseeing. Hang in there, little one, as she murmured, pressing down on the accelerator. The clinic was a beacon of warmth and light against the inky blackness of the surrounding fields. Ellie carefully scooped Hope into her arms, surprised by how little she weighed. Inside, the air was sterile and efficient, a stark contrast to the earthy smells of the barn. She laid Hope on the examination table, her movements quick and practiced. All right, let's see what we're dealing with. Ellie's voice was all business now, the fear pushed aside by a surge of adrenaline. She ran a practiced hand over Hope's thin frame, noting the rapid heartbeat, the elevated temperature. A cocktail of antibiotics and fluids was prepared, each injection delivered with a gentle touch. Hours blurred into a cycle of monitoring vital signs, administering medication, and coaxing Hope to drink small sips of water. Ellie wrapped the foal in heated blankets, her own exhaustion fading into the background. She remembered her first rescue, a scrawny kitten abandoned in a cardboard box. That tiny life had ignited a fire in her, a fierce determination to be a voice for those who couldn't speak for themselves. Dawn was painting the sky in hues of pink and orange when Hope finally stirred. A weak whinny escaped her lips, and her eyes, though still unfocused, held a flicker of recognition. Ellie felt a lump form in her throat. She stroked Hope's soft muzzle. "You're going to be okay," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You just wait and see." The surprise return. The thrum of an engine tore Angus McGregor away from his repair work. He shielded his eyes, smearing grime across his brow. Not a tractor. The pitch was too even. A cold fist squeezed his heart as Dr. Evans's familiar green truck bounced into the yard, trailing a plume of dust that writhed like a vengeful phantom. Back so soon? Barely a day had passed. He flung the wrench onto the workbench, its metallic ring piercing the sudden hush after the engine cut out. He steeled himself. This boded ill. Creatures rarely returned from Evans's mysterious clinic, certainly not unscathed. He trudged toward the vehicle, boots scuffing on the packed earth. Evans was already emerging, her expression a closed book. The knot in Angus's got twisted tighter. He dreaded the news, the confirmation that the little Mustang was lost. Their acquaintance had been brief, yet the sight of her, all fragile limbs and huge, startled eyes, had lodged itself in his affections. "Doctor," he rasped, voice thick with apprehension. "What happened?" Evans circled the truck's hood, a small bundle nestled in her arms, swathed in a thick, woolen blanket like the ones his wife used to knit. A silver wisp of man air peeked out. His breath caught. "Hope?" Evans affirmed with a nod, her eyes glistening. "She's stable. Weak still, but tenacious. I nursed her through the night. She took a little milk this morning." He gaped, utterly bewildered. "Alive? Truly alive?" He extended a work-worn hand, almost afraid to make contact. I don't comprehend." "Neither do I, entirely," Evans confessed, her voice subdued. But she possesses a fierce will to live, Angus. I could sense it. Mother's love. Angus watched from the fence line, arms crossed, as Dr. Evans carefully led Hope back to the pasture. The foal, still wobbly, leaned heavily against the vet's legs. He hadn't admitted it aloud, but seeing the little thing fight had stirred something in him. Still, he remained skeptical. A mother's love? Seemed like sentimental hogwash. Ellie stopped a few feet from the mare, who stood rigid, ears twitching, scenting the air. Hope whinnied, a thin, reedy sound. The mare answered with a low rumble, a sound that vibrated in Angus's chest despite the distance. Slowly, cautiously, she approached. Ellie stepped back, giving them space. The mare circled Hope once, her breath misting in the cool morning air. Then, she lowered her head and nuzzled the foal, a soft, hesitant touch that quickly became more insistent. Hope leaned into her mother, nuzzling back, a tiny tremor running through her body. Angus felt a lump form in his throat. He'd seen mares and foals before, of course, but never quite like this. Never with such tenderness. It's more than just instinct, Angus, Ellie said, her voice quiet. It's a connection. Our bond. That mare knows Hope is hurting, and she knows, better than any medicine, how to soothe her. The cortisol levels will drop, the immune system will get a boost. A mother's presence, it's powerful medicine. The mare continued to groom Hope, licking her coat, her eyes soft and focused. Hope, in turn, seemed to relax, the tension visibly draining from her small frame. She even took a few tentative steps, her gait a little steadier than before. Angus shifted his weight, the gravel crunching under his boots. He looked from the mare to Ellie, a question in his eyes. You really think this will make a difference? Ellie nodded, her gaze unwavering. I know it will, Angus. It already is. The vet was stubborn, he'd give her that. Keep an eye on them but let them be. She added, a mother's love is sometimes the only medicine needed. A community's care. Dr. Evans arrived each morning just as the sun painted the eastern sky in hues of rose and gold. She carried a worn leather bag filled with tinctures and salves, her face etched with a focused determination that softened only when she saw Hope. The foal, though still weak, would lift her head at the sound of Ellie's approaching jeep, a faint whinny escaping her parched throat. All right, little one, Ellie would murmur, kneeling beside Hope's makeshift bed of straw. Let's see how we're doing today. She showed Angus how to prepare a special gruel, a mixture of oats, molasses, and electrolytes, explaining the importance of each ingredient with patient clarity. Angus, initially hesitant, his large hands clumsy with the delicate task, gradually began to anticipate her instructions. He learned to measure the gruel precisely, to warm it to the perfect temperature, his gruff exterior slowly melting away as he witnessed Hope's fragile progress. She's got a fighter's spirit, doesn't she? Angus admitted one morning, his voice uncharacteristically soft as he watched Hope nuzzle his hand. Ellie smiled. She does. And she has a community on her side. And indeed, a community had formed. Bess, the sheepdog, usually indifferent to anything but her flock, now lay vigil near Hope, her watchful eyes scanning the barn. Clementine, the farm cat, a creature of aloof independence, would curl up beside the foal, purring a low, comforting rumble. Even the chickens seemed to cluck with a gentler tone when they passed Hope's stall. One afternoon, a storm gathered, the sky darkening with an ominous purple hue. The wind howled, rattling the barn doors, and the rain lashed against the windows. Hope trembled, her breathing shallow and rapid. Angus, panicked, rushed to Ellie's side as she examined the foal. "She's frightened," Ellie said, her voice calm but firm. "We need to keep her warm and calm." Together, they worked through the storm. Angus held a blanket around Hope, shielding her from the worst of the draft, while Ellie sang a soft lullaby, her voice barely audible above the wind. Bess whined softly, pressing closer to the foal, and Clementine rubbed against Hope's flank, her purr a steady reassurance. As the storm raged outside, a fragile sense of peace settled within the barn, a testament to the power of a community united in care. Hope is lost. The morning air hung thick and heavy, promising another scorcher. Ellie pulled into the farmyard, the usual chorus of chickens and geese strangely muted. A bad feeling coiled in her stomach as she approached the makeshift stall. It was empty. The gate, usually secured with a complex knot only Angus understood, hung open, swaying gently in the breeze. "Angus," as she called, her voice tight. He emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag, his face etched with a worry that aged him 10 years. "Ellie, she's gone." The words hit her like a physical blow. "Gone? How? Did she break out?" Angus shook his head, his gaze fixed on the ground. No sign of a break. Just gone. Like a ghost took her. He kicked at a loose stone, the sound echoing in the sudden silence. "I should have listened to you, lass. I should have brought her inside. I was afraid of getting attached." Regret laced his voice, raw and unfamiliar. Ellie bit back the urge to lash out. Now wasn't the time for recriminations. "We need to find her. Now. Angus, think. Did you see anything unusual last night? Hear anything?" He rubbed his temples, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Nothing. Just the usual farm noises. The dogs barked at something around midnight, but they always bark at something." He gestured towards the open fields. She couldn't have gone far. Not in her condition. They started their search, their hope a fragile ember against the growing dread. They scoured the perimeter of the pasture, calling Hope's name, their voices hoarse. The sun climbed higher, beating down on their backs, turning the search into a desperate race against time. Every shadow seemed to hold the promise of her, but each time they drew closer, it was only a trick of the light, a twisted tree root, a discarded piece of farm equipment. With each empty space, with each fruitless call, the ember of hope flickered, threatening to extinguish completely. A sign of strength. Hope. Angus's voice, usually a booming baritone across the fields, was tight with worry. Ellie echoed him, her call a higher, more frantic note. Hope. "Where are you, little one?" Silence answered them, thick and heavy, broken only by the chirping of crickets and the distant caw of a crow. Ellie's heart hammered against her ribs. She scanned the paddock, her eyes darting from the empty hay feeder to the shadowed corner under the old oak. Nothing. "Blast it all," Angus muttered, his face etched with a grim anxiety that surprised Ellie. He'd softened to the foal more than he let on. She couldn't have gotten far. Not in her condition. Then, a sound. Faint, almost imperceptible, but undeniably there. "Oh, Winnie. Did you hear that?" Ellie asked, grabbing Angus's arm. He nodded, his gaze fixed on the copse of trees bordering the creek. Sounds like it came from that direction. They moved quickly, pushing through the thick brush, the air growing cooler and damper as they neared the water. The whinny came again, stronger this time, laced with a desperate hope. And then they saw her. Hope stood at the edge of the creek, her legs planted firmly, her head lowered to the water. She wasn't stumbling, wasn't collapsing. She was drinking. Really drinking. Ellie stopped dead, a sob catching in her throat. Angus let out a low whistle. Hope lifted her head, water dripping from her muzzle, and fixed them with a clear, bright gaze. A flicker of recognition sparked in her eyes. She let out another soft whinny, a greeting this time, not a plea. "Well, I'll be," Angus said, his voice thick with emotion. He ran a hand over his grizzled chin. "Look at her, Ellie. Standing strong. Drinking on her own." Ellie rushed forward, kneeling beside the foal, her hands gently running over Hope's ribs. She still felt too thin, but there was a newfound strength in her muscles, a resilience that hadn't been there before. She's amazing, Angus," Ellie whispered, her voice choked with tears. "She's actually doing it." The setting sun cast long shadows across the field, painting the scene in hues of gold and amber. Hope stood between them, a small, fragile creature, yet radiating an unexpected power. A sign of strength, a testament to the will to live, a beacon of hope in there. A legacy of hope. Angus McGregor squinted at Hope, now a gangly yearling, grazing peacefully in the meadow. "Well, I'll be," he muttered, more to himself than to Ellie Evans standing beside him. "Never thought she'd make it. Stubborn little thing, ain't she?" He scratched his chin, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "You were right. Document. About her, about everything." He didn't elaborate, but Ellie knew he was referring to his initial dismissal of her unorthodox methods and his insistence on seeing only the economic practicality of his farm. Hope thrived. The initial fragility that had clung to her like morning mist dissipated, replaced by a raw, vibrant energy. Her coat deepened to a rich, earthy brown, her manner and tail a cascade of midnight black. She became a magnificent Mustang, a testament to resilience and the unwavering belief of one woman. The entire farm, even Angus, softened under her spell. Visitors came from miles around, drawn by stories of the little foal who defied the odds. Hope became a symbol, a living, breathing embodiment of hope itself. Years spun by like golden thread. Ellie, still tending to the creatures of the valley, received a photograph from Angus. It showed Hope, proud and strong, standing protectively over two wobbly-legged foals. Their coats were the color of sun-bleached sand, their eyes wide and curious. A wave of warmth washed over Ellie. She remembered the day she'd knelt beside Hope, so small and vulnerable, and the fierce protectiveness that had surged through her. Looking out at the rolling hills bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun, Ellie smiled. She knew then, with absolute certainty, that she had made the right decision. It wasn't just about saving a single foal, it was about the potential, the legacy of hope that rippled outwards, touching lives and proving that even in the face of adversity, life, in all its messy, beautiful glory, found a way.